listener production.
Hi, Natarsha Belling with you and welcome to the afternoon edition of The Briefing. Coming up in our deep dive, triple murderer Erin Patterson is back in court. This time we're hearing victim impact statements from her estranged husband Simon and the only survivor of that deadly mushroom meal, Erin Wilkinson. We'll detail all the emotional evidence ahead of Erin's sentencing. But first, let's check the afternoon headlines this Monday, the 25th of August. The federal opposition and some economists are concerned the federal government's first home buyer scheme will only push up prices and not fix the housing crisis. The Prime Minister has announced the government will bring forward the program by 3 months. It will allow all first home buyers to purchase a property with as little as 5% deposit without paying lenders' mortgage insurance. The first home buyers guarantee was one of Labor's key election commitments. But independent economist Saul Eslake has told the ABC it will only increase demand and therefore prices.
Anything that allows Australians to spend more on housing than they'd otherwise be able to results in more expensive housing, which in turn results in lower home ownership rates. And it's not a coincidence or an accident that our home ownership rate has been going down ever since the census of 1966.
But Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has defended fast-tracking the scheme along with a number of other government housing initiatives.
This will make a difference for tens of thousands of additional homes. These measures, together with our Housing Australia Future Fund, our Build to Rent scheme, our Shared Equity scheme, are all about delivering increased supply, but also delivering increased home ownership, increased affordable rentals and increased public housing and affordable housing as well.
And a publishing house has announced the late Virginia Guiffre will release a new tell-all memoir 6 months after her death. Guiffre had completed the 400-page manuscript with journalist Amy Wallace before her death. The 41-year-old accused Jeffrey Epstein of trafficking her to Prince Andrew and died in April by suicide at a property in WA. The new book, titled Nobody's Girl, a memoir of surviving abuse and fighting for justice, is due out in October. And another popular sunscreen has been pulled from Australian shelves amid questions over its effectiveness. Sales of Naked Sunday's SPF 50 plus collagen glow mineral sunscreen have been paused pending further testing after concerns the product may not meet its SPF 50 plus claims. This follows a similar decision last week by Ultraviolet. Now it's time to get into our deep dive on today's heartbreaking evidence as Erin Patterson returned to court after being found guilty on 3 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder over that deadly mushroom lunch in regional Victoria in July 2023. Ahead of Erin's sentencing, the court today heard emotional victim impact statements from the sole survivor of that lunch, Erin Wilkinson, and also Erin's estranged husband. Ian spoke of forgiveness and paid tribute to his late, brave and witty wife. Simon revealed details about his life as a solo parent and the hurdles their children will now face as, quote, everyone else knows their mother murdered their grandparents. Joining us to run through all the new evidence today and what it means for Erin Patterson's upcoming sentence is criminologist Xanthe Mallett. Xanthe, thanks so much for joining us. Erin Patterson is back in court. If you can just explain to us why.
So we're currently going through the pre-sentencing aspect of the conviction. So what we're hearing now is an opportunity for the defence to outline any mitigating factors that they want the judge to consider in sentencing. And really importantly, we're also hearing the victim impact statements from those most affected by what Erin Patterson has done.
Xanthe, some of those victim impact statements have been from Erin's estranged husband, Simon, but also the sole survivor of what we now know was that deadly mushroom lunch. And I'm going to quote some of the quotes from Erin Wilkinson, who lost his wife also at this lunch, what he gave in evidence with the victim impact statements. Mr. Wilkinson said, I, quote, encourage Erin to receive my offer of forgiveness for those harms done to me. I bear her no ill will. He added, my prayer for her is that she will use her time in jail wisely to become a better person. Now I am no longer Erin Patterson's victim, and she has become the victim of my kindness.
Incredibly powerful. Yes. That really speaks to what kind of man Ian Wilkinson really is, to offer forgiveness after losing his wife, other very close members of his family, his sister-in-law, for example, and her husband. And, he almost lost his own life. And from what I've read about what Ian Wilkinson has said, he and his wife were incredibly close. They were true partners in the kindest, best sense of the word. So he has lost so much through this. And to be so kind and forgiving, I think really speaks to the strength and character of the man.
And often we've heard in cases recently, Xanthe, which is really quite fascinating and also powerful, is that the victims of these crimes, and in his case, the survivor because his wife was a victim, is that the forgiveness is about their peace as much as it is about offering the act of forgiveness. Is that a correct analogy?
I would think that probably is in most cases. I think people in some ways need to let go of the negativity so they can move forward as much as possible. But I think in Ian Wilkinson's case, remember, he is a pastor as well. So he has religion to help support him through this. So I don't know Ian Wilkinson, but I imagine it is important for him to know that she can get forgiveness. And he suggested that, she confesses and shares what she's done and asks for forgiveness by God. And so I think we're seeing a number of things here. And I hope that his faith is supporting him at this time, and also the church members for whom he's very close.
Xanthe, we know this case, and as we know, Erin was found guilty of 3 murder charges and 1 of attempted murder. This case has made international headlines. Some very interesting evidence Ian also gave in his victim impact statement today, and I'm quoting him here again, is he says, quote, it's some of the most distressing shortcomings of society that so much attention is showered on those who do evil and so little on those who do good. That's a really interesting position, isn't it?
It certainly is. And you can understand why he would think that. This is the worst, I'm sure the worst time of his life, the worst time of his family's life. And, there is very significant interest in this. And it's probably difficult for him to understand that in some ways, given the kind of man he appears to be. But ultimately, it's such an unusual circumstance. It's so extreme. And Erin Patterson is so unlikely a protagonist, defender in this context that I think it was inevitably going to garner that level of interest. But I imagine for him and his family, this has been incredibly difficult. Imagine the 2 children as well. His 2 grandchildren now know that their mother intentionally killed their family members. And so that's something that's going to be so hard for this family to reconcile. And that's what they're trying to deal with at the moment. And once this process is finished, the sentencing is finished, hopefully they will begin to be able to move forward.
Xanthe, you made a great point there. As we know, there are 2 children involved in this, 2 young children, which would be the children of Simon and Erin. We know that Simon is Erin's estranged husband, also gave a victim impact statement on his children today and detailing the challenges they face. And I'm quoting Erin's estranged husband here, Simon, his evidence, quote, my children, 2 children are left without grandparents as a result of these murders. They have also been robbed of hope for this kind of relationship with their mother that every child naturally yearns for. And as you mentioned earlier, he spoke about the grim reality is they now live in an irreparable broken home with only a solo parent when almost everyone else knows that their mother murdered their grandparents. That's something that these children and Simon have to deal with as a family trying to move forward. Everyone knows what happened.
Absolutely. And, this is not going away anytime soon. This story is going to keep going. We're going to see documentaries. We're going to see probably other podcasts. This story has a long way to go. And for that family, it's going to keep that alive and it's going to make it more difficult for them to heal. And so, there are some people at the heart of this that I think we really need to remember and make sure, as a community, we're being respectful to their they're quiet that they need now and the support that they need. And that may mean leaving them alone. I know people will want quotes and they'll want to hear from Simon, etc. But, that family probably need peace. And when they want to speak, they will.
It would be incredibly challenging for what they're facing right now, Xanthe. Can you explain to us why it's important that Ian and also Simon and other family members and people involved in this scenario with Erin and these murders, why is it important that they give victim impact statements before the sentence?
It's incredibly important for them psychologically. Everyone has the opportunity to do so if they are the victim of a violent crime. Not everyone chooses to, not everyone wants to take that opportunity, but you have to remember that we work within a criminal justice system, which means the focus is on the alleged offender until obviously they're found guilty or otherwise. It is not a victim justice system. So the victims, be they deceased or surviving, they may be witnesses, they are literally part of the Crown's case. They are not there as the central pillar. They're not the focus. And that has been very difficult for victims over the years. And we've learned that that is detrimental to their psychological well-being. And so this is an opportunity for them to take the time to write their statements, to really decide what they want to say to the person who's hurt them, and then have the opportunity to basically look them in the eye and do that. And it's something that many of them need to do, and they can find it a very distressing but cathartic experience. It's an incredibly important part of the process.
So is it also part of those survivors and their victims' healing process as well?
Absolutely. Yes, it certainly is. And I know of people who take, if a sentencing or a case is prolonged, they may take a couple of years to write their victim impact statement, to really nut out. Imagine you're trying to really get to the heart of what you want to say to that person who's hurt you more deeply than anybody could imagine. What words can you find? And so to go through that, the mental process of writing that and then expressing that is incredibly important for their healing.
Also mentioned today as part of this court hearing, Xanthe, was actually Justice Beale has been asking Erin's defence team about Patterson's diagnosis with Asperger's syndrome and also autism spectrum disorder, ADHD and anxiety. What does that mean? We haven't heard those details before, have we?
No, I don't believe we have. And I think what the defence is trying to say is that because of this, it's what we would class as a mitigating factor in sentencing, perhaps, and that's how it's being presented. So the defence is suggesting the judge should take that into consideration because he's saying that she will find prison life harder than other people because of her diagnosis. So she may have some issues with communication and other behavioural issues that is going to make it harder for her in prison than those who aren't suffering from these conditions.
And in regards to the sentencing, no date has been set as yet on what sentence will be handed down to Erin Patterson. But what will they actually be looking at? It's more about parole. Is that correct, Xanthe?
Absolutely. She's been found guilty of 3 murders and 1 attempted murder. So the only sentence that she can receive is life imprisonment. But obviously that comes with a range. So life is basically usually a minimum of 25 years. And then the judge will take into account what we class as aggravating factors and mitigating factors. Aggravating factors are things that make the sentence longer because they're considered to have made the crime more heinous, for example. And mitigating factors are what would reduce the sentence. So the defence is arguing that her diagnosis should reduce her sentence, but has acknowledged that it will be life. Now, the judge will also consider that we have 3 murders. Poison is an incredibly awful way to die. Death cap mushroom toxin is horrible. And so he will take that into account. He will take into account the lack of any remorse, the lies. And so it is incredibly difficult, complex process, sentencing. It's not quick. And people don't generally take into account everything that the judge will, and he'll weigh all of that very carefully before reaching a decision. But really here, I think we're looking at the length of parole. That's the only question. Will that be 30 years without parole? Will it be 40 years? The judge even has the option of giving life without the possibility of parole if he thinks it's serious enough. That's very unusual, but it has happened.
So what we've heard today, and there has been some very emotional new evidence heard in court from these victim impact statements. Do you think it sheds any more important light on many questions that still surround this case, being why? There's no question over if she did do it, because she has been found guilty of 3 counts of murder and 1 of attempted murder. Do you think it sheds any more light on why?
I don't think it has, to be honest with you. I think the only person who could really shed any light on that is Erin Patterson herself, and she clearly isn't sharing why she did this. I would imagine she's still claiming that she didn't, although her defence counsel has accepted she's been found guilty. So we are hearing some incredibly emotive language from her victims, but that doesn't really speak to why she did it. And so I'm not sure we'll ever be any clearer unless Erin chooses to share that.
Our thoughts are certainly with her children and all the survivors and victims. Thanks so much, Xanthe, for joining us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
That was criminologist Dr. Xanthe Mallett. And that's it for this episode of the afternoon edition of The Briefing. We'd love you to subscribe or follow us on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. And we'll be back in your feed tomorrow morning. I'm Natarsha Belling. Thanks for your company.